Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Case. I am the Secretary Treasurer and one of the founding members of the Waterfront Protection Coalition Foundation. On behalf of our coalition partners, our board, and our executive committee, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the Waterfront Protection Coalition Foundation's inaugural Town Hall and Update meeting. Before we begin, I would like to take the opportunity to remind everyone that the purpose of today is to engage in respectful and safe dialogue and to acknowledge that we have members and guests from communities all across the province of British Columbia. The Waterfront Protection Coalition further acknowledges that we live, work, and recreate and share the ancestral and historic lands with many of British Columbia's First Nations, and for that we are grateful. In particular, I wish to acknowledge the Sechelt Nation and the province of British Columbia and wish to work alongside both of them in the long-term stewardship of our lands and our waters. Today, we will hear from a few members of the WPC, as well as some special guests who represent organizations that the WPC is aligned with. In the interest of time, our Q&A will be at the end of our special guest presentation, and it will be facilitated by the system. So I invite all of you to send your questions in, and we will do our very best to answer them in priority as when they're received. To tell you a little bit more about the WPC, I'd like the opportunity to introduce you to my fellow board and executive member, Mr. Bruce McLeod. Over to you, Bruce.
Thank you very much, Jim. The Waterfront Protection Coalition is a grassroots movement funded and staffed by volunteers and by donations. A common thread is that all of our members were upset by the lack of consultation in developing the dock management plan, or I believe referring to it as the DMP. Although there were localized groups lobbying against the DMP, we came together with a goal to represent all regions and community groups within the Sunshine Coast, which will be affected by the proposed DMP, and people across British Columbia if this template is adopted province-wide as suggested by the British Columbia government. We built this group as a coalition to ensure we unify all voices across BC. We're seeking meaningful consultation with government agencies and the Sechelt First Nation. We believe that this plan was developed with faulty science, insufficient studies, and seeks to be a one-size-fits-all approach without taking into consideration site-specific, physical, cultural, and environmental conditions. Much more time should be taken to study, consult, prepare, and implement a workable DMP. Next slide, please. The mission of the Waterfront Protection Coalition is to unify the community, preserve safe and environmentally sound marine assets, strengthen community bonds, build mutually respectful relationships with First Nation stakeholders, to engage the wider community while advocating for fair representation. In doing this, we seek to maintain a high level of environmental responsibility and stewardship while collaborating on solutions that respect all of the stakeholders. Next slide, please. Our asks. We are pro-environment. We favor regulations based on real science, supported by studies conducted by independent, qualified experts. The science the government currently purports to rely on is insufficient and has not even been shared with all the stakeholders. Where is the scientific evidence that proposed changes will increase fish and other marine life stocks and biodiversity? Is there really a connection between docks and fish stocks? Could we achieve greater gains by addressing overfishing and pollution, e.g. cleaning up derelict boats? In fact, many marine structures have their own productive marine ecosystems. What would be the effect of removing these structures? Environmental gains must be supported by science and balanced against the costs. Examples of common ground is we support transitioning for the use of creosote pilings, exposed styrofoam flotation. But there's also unintended and unwanted side effects from reducing and eliminating docks. The increased number of anchoring boats with anchors chains damaging seabeds, has that been studied? The Waterfront Protection Coalition is in favor of developing and initiating pro-environmental initiatives such as installing herring spawning nets, wrapping of existing pilings, shore cleanups, and helping to fund derelict boat removal. We are pro-reconciliation. We're very concerned the DMP in its current form threatens gains achieved in reconciliation in recent years. The lack of consultation has already given rise to unprecedented divisiveness in our communities. Our issues are with the government, not the First Nations. To be clear, we strongly oppose any and all inappropriate statements or actions that threaten reconciliation. We want to work with the Sechelt Nation in the South Coast and other First Nations that will be affected by the DMP in its present or future form to make plans that fairly balance the rights and concerns of all stakeholders. This has to be a win-win for all. We are pro-grandfathering. Change is good. Policies and regulations are always changing, but changes must be implemented fairly. We need to find a simple and fair solution, one that would avoid divisiveness and unreasonable economic hardship. Why apply a new standard? The building code changes. They only apply to new permits and construction, not retroactively. People don't have to tear down and rebuild their homes when new building codes are enacted. To do this would be unreasonably punitive on many levels, including costs. The same should apply to docks. Many, in fact, most docks have existed for generations. The DMP sets new precedents. The Burrard Inlet Recreational Dock Guidelines allow for grandfathering. We also need a transparent process. The process for creating regulation should be visible and involve all affected parties. Tenures for existing docks should be renewed without unreasonable delays or expense. Existing docks that do not have tenure should be licensed subject to compliance with agreed upon safety, engineering, and scientific regulations. We've seen how not to do it. Let's work together cooperatively to fix this. The economics of the DMP have not been taken into account. The government has not taken economic impacts into consideration. No study exists on such impacts. Economic impacts on the Sunshine Coast alone, our draft impact assessment has identified over $500 million absent of the cost for commercial marinas to comply. This could reach $1 billion in the Sunshine Coast alone. If stretched across the province, who knows how much this could cost? Costs are not limited to private citizens, but extend to businesses and communities. One of the many examples of businesses that rely on recreational boaters is the summer boating business and how crucial it is to the coast is the IGA in Pender Harbor. If the IGA closes, all residents of the Northern Sunshine Coast have to drive to Sechelt to buy groceries. The cost to remove a dock exceeds $30,000. The cost of replacing a dock ranges from $50,000 to well over $100,000. These costs must be taken into consideration and balanced against any environmental gains, which require study. The Waterfront Protection Coalition is a coalition. It's community-based with broad membership across southwestern British Columbia. It's a grassroots organization bringing together citizens, businesses, and organizations from across British Columbia to protect property rights from unfair, opaque, and unduly rushed government policies. I'll now pass the presentation back to Jim Case.
Thanks, Bruce. Many of you ask who is behind the WPC, and as discussed, the Waterfront Protection Coalition has only been in existence for 5 short weeks. Initially, 10 people came together who all felt the need to unite the communities that were most affected. And from those initial 10, we chose 5 individuals who we felt could help kickstart the WPC and form our new society. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our current board of directors and executive committee. And I say current board and executive committee because we are a coalition. And as such, we will be expanding our board and our executive committee and already have identified a few individuals from our coalition alliance partners who want to join the WPC and our executive committee as well as our main committees. I'd like to introduce to you Denise Bernelson, who's our interim president. Denise is one of the leading realtors on the Sunshine Coast and one of the original members of the WPC as part of the Dock Defender Group. Denise is an avid boater and lives in Secret Cove. We just heard from Bruce McLeod. Bruce is our vice president and one of the founders of the WPC. Bruce is a mining engineer and he's had a long history of successful negotiations with various First Nations in Canada, as well as federal and provincial ministries. Bruce's family has had a long history in Secret Cove. Brandon Menier is one of the millennials on the WPC and part of the original Dock Defenders team. Brandon manages our website heads up our communications committee currently. He lives in Bargain Harbor and he's an active outdoorsman. Tracy Laninga is one of our other WCP millennials and one of the original dock defenders as well. Tracy's a paralegal and has been a big part of our research and communications team. Tracy lives in Pender Harbor. Yours truly, I was part of the original group that founded the WPC. My role is to help unite the various stakeholders and use my reach and experience to assist wherever possible. Over and above these on a formal board, we have a few on the team who wish to remain anonymous as they have properties that are potentially at risk in the event that the DMP is to put into law as currently written. So please stay tuned as we're going to have more people join our board and our executive committee in the near future. Now let's talk a little bit about the coalition. So go to the next slide, please. As you can see, our vision for the coalition is to include and unite a diverse cross-section of people, groups, communities, and organizations that are or could be adversely affected by policies such as the Dock Management Plan or the unintended consequences of amendments to the Land Act. Without the right consultation and plan to administer in a fair and unbiased manner, we're all at risk to some degree. There's not been a week that's gone by where there has not been an individual or group who could be affected who has not reached out to us and shared their story and asked if they could collaborate. Literally, in all cases, the theme has been common. A lack of consultation that includes a meaningful dialogue, a failure to understand the economic consequences and changes to our community's way of life, a clearly defined administrative process that is unbiased and fair. So let's talk a little bit about our organizational structure and what we hope to change. So go to the next slide. So shortly after the DMP was expanded beyond Pender Harbor, the ministry made reference to once enacted, the DMP would become the template for all of British Columbia. It was then we realized that there was a number of groups all throughout the province who were focused on a similar issue and problem. In most cases, as individual groups, we shared many of the same challenges in terms of resources as well as concerns. Individually, we represented small groups of organizations and small groups of residents. And so when we compare and contrast that to today, where we've combined the communities in the Sunshine Coast, the Howe Sound area, Vancouver Island, the lake communities in the interior, as well as a number of the other marine communities, we now have a coalition that's expanded to thousands. As the coalition expanded, we now have representation from all across British Columbia, and we now wish to organize ourselves in a way that we can share and maximize our resources so we are united as a common front. As individual communities, our voices are in the hundreds. As a united front, our voices are that of 10,000, a voice much too loud to go unheard. As you can see on the top line, we have a very large and diverse group. Our goal is to populate the WPC board, as well as our executive committee and specific committees with the best possible people that we can find that are capable and who have experience, and most importantly, the capacity to help. So if your organization has exceptional people who are experienced, who may want to join us on any one of those three levels, we really want to hear from you. Ideally, we'll have an expanded board and executive committee who can provide oversight to all of the committees and those committee leaders. For example, a science committee. Those individuals will be responsible for all environmental, engineering, any reporting and research for both tidal and fresh waters. Government. We need a group that's responsible for our ongoing outreach, but most importantly, our relationships with federal, provincial, and our First Nations, as well as all of the MLAs and MPs that support us. On the legal front, we have multiple legal strategies going on from a number of our different organizations within the coalition. So coordinating those efforts and those strategies will be paramount to our overall success. On the communications front, WPC has engaged a PR firm, however, that's not enough. Awareness through social media and regular media will turn our groundswell hopefully into a tsunami. So those that are digital marketing gurus, we need your help. Please reach out to us during or post meeting. Community relations. Membership outreach is also key. I'm always amazed at the number of people that I speak to that know nothing about the Land Amendment Act or nothing about the dock management plan. So therefore, continuing to increase awareness and also increasing our unification strategy will be key to our success. Then someone has to look after us. The coalition must be accountable to all of our constituents and the professionals to support us, but most importantly, accountable to all those people who've donated money and want to know where that money is going. We need to recruit a team that can carefully count the beans and report them on them in such a way that it keeps all of our constituents happy. In summary, we need leaders and co-leaders at each level. So again, I reach out to each and every one of you. If you know someone who has the experience and the capacity and the capability, we really want to hear from you. Please reach out at info@waterfrontprotection.org. Next slide, please. So, the dock management plan. As Bruce alluded to, the WPC is not opposed to a well thought out, balanced approach to a dock management plan that is fair and that is consistent. Initially, the plan was to clean up a few areas within Pender Harbor, and now the plan has expanded to become punitive to most of the communities within the SWIA. The plan and its approach is a one-size-fits-all that simply does not work. Our shores on either tidal waters or fresh waters are inconsistent in terms of topography, water depths, current, wind, seabed, and the marine life that thrive there. The environmental science and engineering used to support the current iteration of the DMP is flawed in many cases, and in some cases just simply inaccurate. One quick example is global warming. Many of the reports date back to 2005 to 2007, and over the past 19 years, we have come to learn a great deal more on the subject of rising sea and lake water temperatures as a result of global warming. The SWIA lakes, as well as Pender Harbor and Secret Cove, have experienced record temperatures in the past few years, and this is a trend that is not likely to reverse. None of the reports used to support the DMP studied the unique freshwater ecosystems in the SWIA lakes. So how can the same rules apply? They're currently outlined in this iteration of the dock management plan. Some of the arguments in favor of the current iteration of the DMP say that they were taking best practices from other precedents that have been set. Well, there's an element of truth to that. However, by and large, most of those precedents included aspects of grandfathering in a clear and concise administrative process that also includes a fair and consistent approach to appeals. Another example of unintended consequence is the financial burden to our community, as Bruce alluded to. One of the areas that is a key concern to many people in our communities are worried about the decline in property values. So I would like to call upon our interim president, Denise Bernelson, to speak a little bit about the effects of the DMP on real estate. Denise, over to you.
Thanks, Jim. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. I've specialized in waterfront sales on the Sunshine Coast and surrounding islands and lakes for over 20 years. The dock management plan, the current plan is creating great uncertainty and has therefore had a huge impact on home sales in Pender Harbor and now on the entire Sunshine Coast and again, surrounding islands and lakes. We want to work with all parties to protect the environment going forward. We need the dock management plan to be a fair process for all involved, and time is really of the essence. Thanks. Back to you, Bruce or Jim.
Thank you, Denise. As Bruce also alluded to, we've been compiling some data with respect to the financial impact of the dock management plan. We went through a fairly careful process in looking at the cost of removing docks and boathouses that were non-compliant. We also looked carefully at the replacement cost of those. We looked at the inherent cost, as Denise just alluded to, the inherent cost of property ownership and the potential decline of the property values. Province-wide, when we look at those numbers, they are simply staggering. They're a number that is far greater than I think that any of the ministry officials or perhaps even the First Nation contemplated. So when you combine the financial impact, the lack of consultation, the lack of collaboration, the flawed science used to support the current iteration, it's really become divisive within our communities. My real fear, as Bruce also alluded to, was how this has or will continue to set back reconciliation. So it is crucial that a well-intended plan that was originally as a well-implemented plan is spun out of control with the absence of proper consultation and collaboration with the community, in particular, the very stakeholders that it affects the most. So let's talk about an equally important topic, the Land Act Amendment. So go to the next slide, please. My opening remarks with respect to the amendments to the Land Administration Act is this is a great example of what not to do from a leadership perspective. I don't profess to completely understand what this means for British Columbians, other than the absence of a carefully thought out plan will likely not be smooth for any of us. My first example is the lack of wisdom, or is the wisdom or the lack thereof, of how the government communicated a matter of such great importance to the public. In today's day and age, optics and sound bites create public opinion, and the how seems to be as important or even greater than the what. Again, I don't profess to be an expert, but isn't this matter large enough and come at such an amazingly high financial impact that we should be considering a referendum? At least, considering the social fabric at the core of this current government, should we not have deserved a more fulsome and transparent approach that educated British Columbians on the 2019 legislation regarding DRIPA? Or perhaps even a simplistic explanation as to how all this was going to work and why the government is so keen to implement this so quickly. My second example is the current iteration of the DMP. We are nearly a decade into a plan that is the poster child how a joint decision-making process does not work in favor of all of the stakeholders. Contrary to recent comments from the ministry, tenures have been and continue to be negatively impacted due to a policy that has not even been passed, yet alone understood by all of the folks in the ministry. How can we believe the same thing is not going to happen to all jurisdictions if this amendment is passed as planned by the government? To be redundant here, the lack of meaningful consultation and collaboration with the community, a lack of transparency, no regard for the punitive nature of the DMP, all bound together with a lack of clear administrative plan and process that is fair, has divided a community and has set back many of the positive outcomes reconciliation should and has brought to date. If the ministry was to have used the DMP as a case study for the Land Amendment Act, my guess is the issue would not be as publicized as negatively as is today. Luckily, later on in our meeting, we have a guest speaker who is much more qualified to speak to the proposed amendment than I am. So given that we've all heard what we are doing and where we are, given that, let's talk a little bit about where we're spending your donation dollars. So let's go to the next slide. First off, I want to talk a little bit about our evolving strategy. Given the WPC is a grand old age of 5, almost 6 weeks, our strategy to call it evolving is a bit of an understatement. A few of our coalition colleagues have been at this for a lot longer than we have, and the WPC has benefited from our collaboration and our shared resources with them. Each of the organizations within the coalition have their own strategies and are unique, but in many cases these overlap, and this is where we can find synergy and where we can add to our respective bench strengths. At the core, WPC has 3 strategic pillars. Number 1, we need to redefine the engagement process. To date, we have twice engaged the ministry in writing, the first of which was approximately 2 weeks ago with a letter from the WPC directly. Today, we sent a second letter from our legal counsel, which had a deadline for Friday for some form of feedback. We have also written to the Chief and Council of the Sechelt Nation asking for a meeting. To date, both requests have gone unanswered. Failing a response by Friday, our plan is to go to Plan B to inspire a little bit of cooperation when it comes to engagement. Part of Plan B involves all of you. So I'm encouraging each and every one of our members, and for you to encourage all the people that you know that could be affected by the Land Amendment Act and or the DMP, to reach out and to make sure that you make your voices heard. The comment period for the DMP is up this Friday, and so inundating with ministry, your MLAs, and anyone who will listen with your communication would go a long way to support our initiative. Plan B also includes a dedicated social media push to ensure awareness and that our current content is kept top of mind with all of our members and all of those that visit our website. We're behind on our digital strategy, but we plan to catch up with more volunteers that can help guide us in this area. Engagement, once established, will also include working together with all stakeholders in redrafting the DMP so it's clear, fair, and properly supportive of all of the stakeholders that it affects. Our second strategic pillar is the need to align on policy objectives. As Bruce alluded to, grandfathering of environmentally sound and safe boat shelters and docks has to be core to any plan. A fair and clear administrative process that includes unbiased appeal process is also a key point in any successful plan. Impartial science to support environmental and engineering for specific areas and not a one-size-fits-all approach will ensure a fair process is undertaken. Prior to the expansion of the DMP to any of the other areas, we also asked that a full and meaningful engagement process with all of those stakeholders in those areas take place. The third pillar of our strategy, and perhaps one of the keys to the overall success, is reconciliation. It is crucial that each of us do our best to foster long-term relationships with all of BC's First Nations people who are stakeholders in policy changes such as the DMP or any changes to the Land Act. We as a coalition have a duty to educate our respective communities on areas such as the UN DRIP and the DRIPA and how both will factor into the long-term stewardship of our shared land and waters. And lastly, to continue to acknowledge and respect First Nations, their communities, their history, and their need for long-term self-sustainability. Together, we will continue to build out and refine these three strategic pillars, and we may add more. It's a very fluid and evolving strategy. So enough for me. What I'd now like to do is introduce you to Brandon Menier to help summarize what your coalition team has accomplished. So Brandon, over to you.
Thanks, Jim. So a bit of background. Since launching our initiative a little over 5 weeks ago, the Waterfront Protection Coalition has made significant progress. We've officially formed our society and appointed an executive committee to lead our efforts. We've established our online presence and newsletter, worked to raise community awareness, retain legal counsel, and hired a PR firm alongside our fundraising efforts. We have engaged with the Fraser Institute for Research Insights and met with politicians who have followed up with press releases, public statements, and videos of their own, further amplifying our cause. We have sent several formal letters to Chief Joe with the Seashell Nation, the Premier and Minister Cullen, urging them to open a dialogue and collaborate with the WPC so our concerns and those of our members can be voiced. Behind the scenes, we have spent countless hours on research and analysis. We have summarized an overwhelming amount of reference materials. This work will be critical as we move forward on establishing our subcommittees and commissioning scientific, engineering, and financial studies that broadly consider all ramifications of the DMP. We're making waves in the media and gearing up to take our social media presence to the next level soon as well. We also have a mailing campaign that's just around the corner to focus on increasing public awareness and strengthening WPC support. It's been a busy few weeks, but we are all focused on protecting our coastal and aquatic communities, and we are just getting started. Recently, the boat show was a public stage we used for spreading the word on the WPC, the DMP, and the Land Act amendments. I'll pass it over to Denise Brennelson to speak a bit more on that.
Thanks, Brandon. So a few of us from the coalition went to the boat show, the annual Vancouver Boat Show on February 1st. We spoke to the executive at the AGM of the BC Boating Association, at their invitation and presented on behalf of the Waterfront Protection Coalition. The Association of Professionals in the Boating Industry offer counsel on business and governance issues, as well as representing and advocating on behalf of the boating industry. Clearly, the association is concerned about the dock management plan and the financial and social impact to all boaters and the $2 billion boating industry in BC. We appreciated the opportunity to engage with these professionals. The Waterfront Protection Coalition has formed alliances within the boating industry and through Boating BC and the Council of BC Yachts, and ultimately the end users, which is all of us. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Denise. Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy. I'm here to talk about the media that's been going on the last few weeks. So there's been some great media coverage in reference to the dock management plan and the Land Act. Huge shout out to the Pender Harbor and Area Residents Association for fielding most of the media inquiries, and to Robin Younger for posting his very informative article about the Land Act amendments on the Macmillan LLP website. Without these efforts, most British Columbians outside of the Sunshine Coast area would not be aware of what's going on. The WPC has been working extremely hard behind the scenes with coalition members and other aligned organizations throughout the province to create a grassroots groundswell in the media. We have been supplying key information and messaging strategies to unite our voices in opposition to the DMP and the Land Act amendments. The WPC has been educating and meeting with key MLAs from across the province. Many of these MLAs have been issuing press releases, talking to the media, posting videos, commenting on social media, and growing this media groundswell. At the same time, we've been supplying several media outlets with factual information to help them gain a better understanding of why people on the Sunshine Coast and across BC are so upset. The next step is to grow this groundswell into a tsunami. As Jim and Brandon both mentioned, the WPC will be rolling out a social media campaign later this week. We have already created handles on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. This campaign will be targeted and will further unite opposition to the DMP and the Land Act amendments under one voice. We'll be sending an email update to let everyone know once we are live with all these handles on social media. We need to continue our media efforts and work together to grow this groundswell into a tsunami. Now to talk about fundraising, back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Tracy. So I might have fibbed a little bit at the beginning of the presentation. My real job is begging for money. But before I start begging for money, what I really like to do is I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks and appreciation to all of you that have donated so generously. We had an initial goal of $1 million and we're almost a third of the way there, and we've only been at it for really about 4 weeks. So again, on behalf of all of the coalition, to those of you that have donated, we can't thank you enough. To date, the majority of the work has been done through hardworking volunteers, and I mean who work tirelessly. But there are areas where your generous donations have to fund areas that we can't control through volunteerism. So first and foremost is our legal strategy. Fortunately, we have a retired lawyer of Scottish descent paired with a paralegal of Dutch descent, so rest assured, a dollar is not spent without a high degree of oversight by our resident legal team. Our initial budget for legal is approximately $250,000. Hot on the heels of legal strategy is our government relations and our PR strategy, a highly complex and sensitive area to navigate for sure. We need experience and knowledge, and that will be in part the key to our success. The WPC has decided on Kirk & Company to help us navigate the ministerial quagmire, as well as help us develop relationships with the First Nation to ensure that we do so in a respectful, transparent, and professional manner. Our PR budget is approximately $250,000. Science and research. The coalition members have done a great job in collecting and categorizing much of the environmental and engineering research to help support our efforts. Unfortunately, government and media look to professionals. Those reports are necessary, and we are unsure of the total quantum of all of the information that we require to either refute the science that exists today and or support the science necessary for us to get our point of view made clearly. We understand that we have a number of engineers and marine biologists and other professionals within our membership, so we're hoping that a number of you come forward after this evening and give us a hand with this. Initially, we're planning a preliminary science budget of approximately $150,000, and that will include both fresh and salt water. Communications and media. We have a preliminary budget of approximately $150,000 to cover things like op-ed, advertising, and general and traditional media. As Tracy alluded to, our digital and social media strategy is just taking place. That's something that can be a bit of a black hole in terms of a spend. We have no idea what that's going to look like, but we've put an initial placeholder of approximately $150,000 in order to make sure the entire province is aware of what our fight is about and how they can help us. In total, that adds up to approximately $800,000, and with an additional $200,000 for contingency to make up the $1 million. Not only does the WPC need your funding, but so does all of the other organizations that are part of our coalition that are also in desperate need of your donation. So please, when you're thinking about donating your dollars, think carefully about where you would like to place them and where you think you get the most value. Again, please donate generously. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of how we can get your help and support, we really need you to tell the government why you don't support the dock management plan or the Land Act amendments in their current form before the comment periods are over. So we encourage you to contact your minister by visiting our website, or the many websites are on the subject, waterfrontprotection.org, and submit your feedback in the DMP and the Land Act amendments. Also encourage you to donate not only to the Waterfront Protection Coalition, but your own organizations. Also encourage you and all of the people that you think would be interested to sign up for our newsletter. It costs you nothing to join the coalition. And if you tell us to stop begging you for money, we will. So spread the word, tell us your stories, follow up with questions. And again, very much appreciate all of your support and all those generous donations that have come in. So on behalf of the Waterfront Protection Coalition, thank you for participating. We're going to turn it over to Q&A now. So Brandon, take it away.
Thanks, Jim. There's been a lot of questions come in, an overwhelming amount. I've tried to respond to as many as I could. Back to the people that have asked them. If your question didn't get answered and you would like more information, please send us an email, reach out, don't hesitate. We will get the answer that you're seeking. I've got a few here I've chosen, so let's just start with what inroads has the WPC made to date? Maybe Jim or Bruce like to field that?
Sure, thank you. Inroads have been challenging. As I think you see a common thread for not only by the WPC, but also from a number of the guest speakers, is we have been successful in reaching out to some of the elected officials provincially and federally. But when it comes to Minister Cullen, we have not seen any response at this time. He has gone on the record talking about consultation. We're a group that has broad representation across the Sunshine Coast and southern British Columbia. I think we've tried to show that we are respectful and we'll do it in a manner that relies on science and less on emotion. That's our big push. I think one of the things that we can ask everybody to do is, if you look on our website at waterfrontprotection.org, you'll see on our resources page of where you can reach out to the elected officials. And I think the more people that do that, more frequently they do that, the more chance that that we're going to get a response that includes meaningful consultation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Bruce. There's a couple here I'll quickly answer. Can we get speaking points on the Land Act amendment, and when is the end date to provide feedback on the DMP and the Land Act amendments? The feedback deadline on the DMP is the 16th of February, and the Land Act amendments is March 31st. And more information, like Bruce just said, is available on our website for both of those. Likewise, we've got some useful information in the resource section that can help you with assembling a letter if you'd like that help. Just pick another question here and then we'll probably wrap it. We're running out of time. What does success look like for the WPC as it relates to the dock management plan? Jim, do you want to field that one?
Sure. Thanks, Brandon. I guess there's several components to success. First of all, we'd like an extension so that proper consultation takes place with all of the key stakeholders. We need time to get our science buttoned up. We need time to actually have some of these ministerial officials visit the very communities that are affected most. And I think process of meetings with both the ministry and First Nations, I believe that we can come up with a dock management plan that's actually going to suit all stakeholders. And there's going to have to be give and take on both. I think we'd be foolish to think that that they'll abandon the dock management process completely. I think it's here to stay, and success for us is just getting it into a form that's acceptable to the majority of our stakeholders. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Jim. There's definitely been some pretty specific questions come in, so I would recommend if you sent in a pretty detailed question, please send it to us via email, and we will, do our best to get your response on that. That's pretty much all I've got here for now, I would say. So we want to move on to Tracy with a final remark.
Please.
Everyone, sorry about the technical issues just there. I'm battling between a few different apps and platforms, but just in closing, and before we sign off for the evening, just to reiterate the action plans that we have, we urge everyone to visit our website, subscribe, submit feedback on the DMP, the Land Act portals before they close, send your letters out. Our voices and messaging, it's starting to gain traction, and we just need to keep this pressure going. I'd also like to say a few thank yous here just before everyone leaves for the night. I'd like to thank my fellow board members, first of all, and a special thank you to our volunteers on the board as well. Like, everyone has worked tirelessly for over the last 2 months to get us where we are today. I'm truly amazed by what we have accomplished in such a short time. So thank you. A huge thank you to everyone who's donated to the WPC or other aligned organizations. The WPC, as well as most coalition member organizations, are volunteer based. So your donations are instrumental in keeping our initiatives going and allowing us to fight hard every single day. If you can, please consider donating later today. I'd like to thank all of our special guests who spoke here tonight. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we will have all the information, as we always do, on our website. So that'll all be available to you. And our coalition members also who were not able to join tonight, thank you for your support, the community support and encouragement that we have received from coalition member organizations is such a key part of our success. It's making a world of difference. We are stronger together. And last but definitely not least, I want to thank everyone for joining us here tonight. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your stories. Thank you for your research. Thank you for your drive. You are what keeps us motivated, and we are both honored and humbled by the turnout tonight. If you haven't already subscribed to our website, please do. Send us your stories, send us your ideas, send us your questions, watch for our email blasts. And if anybody is interested in helping, please consider becoming a volunteer. We would love to work with you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and we'll be in touch. Stay on the website. Good evening.